Hi, this is Allison Kramer. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this webcast. I am here with Sean Berry, and we are going to walk through a brief couple of slides up front where we tell you a little bit about the context around SecOps and some of the things, strategies BMC is pursuing right now, and then we will show you a product demo of our new SecOps Response Service. If you have any questions, we are happy to field those as we go through, so please go ahead and submit your questions through the question tool, and we will answer them as they come. Okay. So in February of this year, we announced some research that we had just done with Forbes Insights. And one of the key narratives that came out of that was different things executives were looking about their security strategy, things that were causing them to change the way they were approaching security and compliance, and things that were causing them to look at the tooling and the processes, et cetera, that they had and finding them a little bit lacking. 65% of the executives said it was their cloud adoption. That was one of the biggest things that was impacting their security strategy. They felt like the emergence of cloud, they needed different tools. Some of those cloud operations tools were a bit immature based on manual steps, a lot of scripting. And they also were struggling because they were needing different tools per silo. So we dug in a bit more deeply there, and we were starting to talk to folks about, okay, how do we peel back this problem? How do we start looking at where we can help folks address these issues? So one of the things that comes up more often than not is fighting back against known vulnerabilities, wherever they may lie. That's obviously particularly germane today, given the activities over the past few days, starting May 12th with WannaCry. But Rob Joyce from the NSA, actually a year ago, had said that known vulnerabilities are really the biggest threat, as that was one of the things his team was looking at. Zero-day excursions get lots of press, but it's actually those known vulnerabilities and the ability to combat them is one of the bigger problems people have, and one of the things that make them most weak to hackers. So when you look at some of the data and the stats around this, of can you patch before your hackers can penetrate, half of all exploitations happen between 10 and 100 days after the vulnerability has been published, with the average around 30. Now, if you follow, again, the WannaCry timeline, there were about 7 days between when that was released on WikiLeaks to when Microsoft came out with a patch, and then about another 59 days until they actually went out with the ransomware. That was actually a little bit slow, honestly, versus this timeline here. So you know they were probably touching it. There's probably other folks who might be taking advantage of it. These are things to consider. But a startling difference is that the average company takes 193 days to get a patch out. This is leaving huge areas of risk for most organizations, partly because we're not able to patch fast enough. Another area is when we're reintroducing those same vulnerabilities back into our environments again. Sometimes once you take care of it once, you have to keep scanning, keep making sure that it's not been re-released because someone used an old template or maybe an old piece of code. When you look about the number of vulnerabilities you're trying to keep track of, the top 10 vulnerabilities account for about 85% of successful exploit traffic. Now, so you could focus there, right? It's not a terrible strategy to focus at the top 10 and get rid of 85% of the traffic. But at the same time you're in there, you have to consider if you wanted to have more broad-based coverage, the other 15% cover over 900 CVEs. So one of the things to focus on in here, one of the things that we've looked at is that this is an area ripe for automation, simply because of the scale. Hundreds and thousands of CVEs out there all the time. The scale of your environment, how many environments are you checking, how many places do you have to remediate, how many different types of environments do you have to remediate, what stages are they in the process. There's a lot of different considerations, and you need tooling that can allow you to touch that with some level of flexibility. The next piece of the puzzle, so this is what we were thinking about when we looked at BMC SecOps Response Solution. There were three big pieces of what we felt like we needed to be able to offer. The first is vigilant governance, so a way that you can validate that you've managed all of your systems appropriately. I don't know how many people probably walked into work on Monday and were asked the question of, where are we on WannaCry? Are we safe? Or how long is it until we are? Not a lot of people probably had a great answer, right? They had to pull a lot of different charts together, a lot of different teams together, a lot of different people together. Using SecOps Response Service, that's going to give you that one-stop shop where you can go and look and see and have confidence and know where you are. Operational intelligence, the integrated visibility to build trust between security and operations. In my experience talking to different teams, there aren't a lot of security and operations teams that maybe feel like that working relationship is where it needs to be. Security feels like they're dumping off a lot of information with operations who aren't necessarily doing anything with it. Operations feels like security just sends them these lists and lists of things to do without a lot of context in why they can't touch some things, why it's taking so long, or maybe not really taking all that long. Building something where both folks can see the same data but cut from a perspective that makes sense to them. And multi-tier remediation. That's the way to accelerate and scale your remediation. Now, automation in this context is not root. It's not you do the exact same thing every single time. In this particular scenario, we're talking about something more sophisticated that can keep in mind the different scenarios that you may have. The solution does have some native out-of-the-box integrations that will help, one, for ease of implementation, but then secondly, will help build in that operational intelligence. The first is the integration with top vulnerability scanning tools. There is out-of-the-box integration to Rapid7, Tenable Nessus, and Qualys. So the product will ingest those scans and then instantly help the operations teams be able to prioritize those different vulnerabilities and then push out into the remediation step. One of the things that is key to the BMC solution is that we do focus on the action. To us, opening the ticket is really the beginning of the story. It's not the end. So that is why we felt strongly about the integration that we have to these endpoint management systems, like obviously the Blade Logic portfolio, so server automation and network automation, and then also Microsoft SCCM. So with that, I am going to turn over to Sean Berry so he can take you through the product.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at. My name is Sean Berry. I'm a solution evangelist with BMC, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how SecOps Response helps drive forward the process of closing vulnerabilities. One of the things that I think probably everybody saw on CNN, et cetera, on Saturday or on Friday or Saturday was the news about WannaCry and MS-17-10. Many of our customers called us up to check on how they could demonstrate compliance to these patches, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go through this. One of the ways that the SecOps Response product really helps out is it connects to the remediation engines and the discovery engines and the automation engines that you may already have in your environment, be that Blade Logic Server Automation, Microsoft System Center, and also using BMC Discovery and BMC Atrium Orchestrator to reach into your environment, both for remediation and also to discover the servers in your environment. So the way that works is we have a connector. SecOps Response is a cloud-based platform, and connectors run on your endpoints, on your automation systems, to then go communicate with the cloud from the infrastructure solutions you have, whether it's System Center, as I have it on the left here, or Blade Logic Server Automation on the right side. Whatever tools you happen to have in your environment, we tie into very nicely. You can figure up some connection credentials for those, download fully configured connectors, stand them up on your environment, and then they will check in with the cloud platform and start providing access to that environment. So then you come back to the platform, log in through credentials that you already have. Those are passed through to your system. We don't retain them, so that solves a lot of problems. And then once you're in SecOps Response, you'll have a nice console that shows you your current available operations. And then we're going to work through a little workflow on the top left here. And basically, we work from the bottom to the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by importing scan files. So whether it be Nessus, Qualys, or Rapid7, whatever scanning technology you have, or anything that can be transformed into one of those formats. It's very easy to go identify those scan files. We've got Qualys and Nessus engines in our own environment that we can go run scans on. Pull those scans in, load them into here or via an API in a fully automated fashion. Identify what severities we want. A lot of my customer organizations are only focusing on SEV4s and SEV5s while they stand up their security practice. And as Allison said, just because it's not a SEV4 or SEV5 doesn't mean it's not important. It just may not be where you're focusing this particular month. So in some cases, we'll focus on just the higher ones. Real easy to filter that out here. And then you go pull those in, and they'll load, and then show up in our list of available scans. Now, why do the scans matter? The scans are the information that the security officers have available to them. They know where the vulnerabilities are because that's what the scanning tools do. All right, so what do we need to do next? We need to map those down to assets. So the servers, as you see on the right side, the servers as known to your scanner versus how they're known to SCCM or Blade Logic, we've got to line those up so that we know we're basically making the giant list of IP addresses that comes out of your asset scanning tools. We're turning that into action by mapping them in by host names as known to Blade Logic and to SCCM. And then once they're mapped, the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out how we're going to go remediate them. And that consists of what we call vulnerability mapping. So we've got a vulnerability ID. On the SCCM, on the Blade side, we talk to them by common vulnerability entry, CVE. On the Windows side, because most Windows administrators think of things in terms of Microsoft bulletins, instead of looking at them by CVE, we look at them by Microsoft bulletin. So in this case, we see some vulnerabilities. MS16-147 was the 147th vulnerability that came out in 2016, and so on and so forth. And what we're going to do is we're going to map those over to software updates or to Windows patches or to another type of update that's available to SCCM. And what that does is, because now we've got the hosts mapped, we've got the IPs in the scans mapped to the hosts known to SCCM or to Blade Logic, and then we're going to map these vulnerabilities to the fixes for them. Now we're set up to remediate these vulnerabilities in an automated fashion. And so here we see some of the vulnerabilities for MS16-001. So now that we've got the assets mapped and we've got the vulnerabilities mapped, now we can go in and take some action. So when we come over to the security dashboard, this is the view that the security officer will use. And the thing that's really important to understand here is we've got two different views for two different roles for two different reasons. The security side wants to be able to see, for these given vulnerabilities, what actions are we taking, when are we taking them, are things going forward, or is all the information that we're passing over to IT ops going into a black hole? And this is the heart of where all of this happens. So, for example, if you wanted to filter by MS17-10, you can come through on the left side or through any of the specific security bulletins that came afterwards. You can come over to the left side and filter by those bulletins. And you can get a very focused, specific view for just the one security bulletin, or you can filter by SEV5s, SEV4s. Maybe you don't even want to focus and put time into the SEV1s, 2s, and 3s. Maybe you want to filter by just looking at your hosts that are out in the cloud space, your Amazon and Azure hosts. The dashboard lets you slice and dice this information that we've so painstakingly collected through three different major ways. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at these vulnerabilities by how long they're waiting attention. So on average, in this environment, they're waiting about 15 days. For the SEV1s and SEV2s, that's fine. Their SLAs are a little longer. They're still mostly in the green. As we get up into the SEV3s, you see them starting turning yellow-red. And if you go up into the SEV5s, you see that I've got a couple of vulnerabilities that have taken longer to get attention paid to them than our SLAs do. And so that lets me focus on making sure I'm hitting things in my SLAs versus just taking action that isn't necessarily prioritized or focused. All right, so these vulnerabilities, as I see, are awaiting execution. So we've gone through and looked at what we're going to do with them. These are the ones that have activity scheduled for them, remediation activity. And then we can also look at how long it takes to actually close them. Most of my production IT ops and security ops people that I talk to will tell you that most of the time these days is not spent in actually deploying the patches or figuring out what to patch. More of it these days is spent in figuring out the change control process and how long it's going to take to get those things approved, tracking down the people who do the approvals. It's part of why we've automated the change integration process so that we can take the extra cost and the extra time out of this process. All right, so the next thing we'll do is we'll look at total vulnerability count by stage, right? So how many vulnerabilities are awaiting attention? How big is my workload? How big is the elephant ahead of me, so to speak? And then once I've got those vulnerabilities and want to go do something with them, how long does it take for them to actually execute? So if it's Friday afternoon and I know that I've got MS-17-10 and I know that I've got all these vulnerabilities that need to go out, the IT ops role, their work is done when they sit down and schedule the patches for remediation. Now there may not be a maintenance window for a couple, 3 days. The blue line in this graph shows vulnerabilities that have been mapped, have been scheduled, but they're waiting to actually execute when the maintenance window opens. Now the big difference between that and awaiting attention is the ones that are awaiting attention I haven't even scheduled yet, right? So this gives the security team great visibility into what's been dealt with and is just waiting execution, and then what's actually been closed. So once the patches or the configuration items or the packages get deployed to go close those vulnerabilities, they're going to go into a closed state, and then obviously you can see this overall. And you can see that a lot of red under that graph means that my IT ops guys have a lot of work to do as far as getting these vulnerabilities dealt with. But again, we can filter by severity. Maybe the ones that are waiting are mainly sub 1s, 2s, and 3s, and they're lower priority for us. So now let's go over to the operator dashboard. This is where things get executed. This is where the work gets done. The operators, our IT operators, take the input from the security team. They understand what vulnerabilities are prioritized, what's got the highest visibility, and our IT operators are going to then prioritize that work and figure out how to deploy patches in an appropriate fashion. So they're going to look at what's within SLA, what's approaching, and obviously what's exceeded our SLA. I think everybody's been in a meeting where they heard about things that had exceeded SLAs and how that was problematic. So if I wanted to filter down just by my sub 5s and go apply that information, go apply that as a filter, it would show me just the sub 5s, and then I can go remediate that. So if we look here in the bottom right corner, there's that big remediate button. So by picking the sub 5s, applying the filters, and then clicking the remediate button, I'm going to go create a remediation action. So in this case, I've got my sub 5s for all of my Amazon and Azure hosts. I create a remediation. Every job needs a name, right? I say I'm remediating all the sub 5s on the AWS hosts. There's my list of all of the vulnerabilities. Maybe I want to filter 1 or 2 in or out. That's certainly easy to do. Maybe I just want to focus on MS-15-034 on this particular host. So I've unhighlighted everybody else and just this guy. I'm going to identify what SCCM resources I'm going to use to deploy these patches. And then I'm going to schedule when this action is going to happen. And I usually want to do things now in my non-prod environments, or I'm going to schedule it to happen maybe Saturday night at 10 or 11 o'clock this weekend when the maintenance window opens on that target. And then once that's ready to go, I get a nice little last-minute confirmation, and then the operation will show up in my dashboard. And I can see these operations that are all scheduled. From an IT ops perspective, I love this because I've got good visibility into the work that I've got scheduled. I've got direct control over what happens. And this is going to go back and do all of the harder legwork of creating the operation in SCCM or in BSA. All right, so then I'm going to see that operation actually show up. We're going to create a special device collection for that, remediate all sub 5 AWS vulnerabilities. It's going to show up in SCCM. and I'm going to see the remediation task also show up in that list. And then I can basically go do the same thing over from the BSA side, right? So from a BladeLogic perspective, I've got all of the exact same screens to go through and do my mappings, identify a remediation script. So, one of the things that it's kind of one of the funny little secrets and not so funny little secrets about vulnerabilities is that only a certain percentage of vulnerabilities can be remediated by OS patches. Many of the ugliest ones, especially like the things around JBoss and some of the application infrastructures, can only be closed by turning off weak ciphers, by turning on password authentication, by doing basic configuration changes. And this is how we're going to map those configuration changes in on the BladeLogic side. So if you already have a script or a package or something that you can use for remediation, if you look on the right side, you see that this particular vulnerability is mapped to a particular script that will fix this. Now, if you already have a whole bunch of scripts that you've built to go close vulnerabilities, you can bolt these on really easy, really fast, and get a lot of great value out of them. And again, you'll go through the same view. You'll see the security dashboard. You'll see the different views into these vulnerabilities as they're shown and visible to the BladeLogic hosts. You will see tasks awaiting attention, but now you'll also see tasks awaiting change approval. And so one of the challenges in any decent-sized enterprise is not creating the jobs, but actually getting the change approval to go do the work. You'll see them wait execution and then hopefully close in a timely fashion. So that's most of the process is basically the same whether you run an SCCM or BladeLogic. The end goal, of course, is being to close out these remediations and see these changes happen. So here's the equivalent operation running on the BladeLogic side. And as you can see, we get along quite nicely whether we're running on SCCM or BladeLogic. Whatever infrastructure you have, whatever automation infrastructure we have, we can make all of this work the same on either side. And then we've got a lot of other information as far as how the deep dive on this stuff works. But I think for most of us, our goal is to see these vulnerabilities close out in a timely fashion and see them get quickly remediated. So we've got about 4 minutes left. I want to make sure we had some time to address any questions that we had at this point. I know I've been talking for probably north of 20 minutes and haven't really stopped for breath. So if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them or address them.
So Sean, we do have one.
Great.
The question is, do you have the means to import my BMC discovery inventory files, CSVs, and report known vulnerabilities in those software products? So could you go through the integration with discovery and what it does and what it doesn't do?
Sure, that'd be great. So I've got some stuff as far as how to set up that integration, and forgive me guys as I click around a little bit looking for this. We've got integration. Yep, so there's the integration with Discovery. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a connector that's going to reach out to ADDM via the API, and it's going to pull back the Discovery, so you don't even have to deal with it at the CSV level. We'll just automatically pull those scans over, or pull those inventories over. And then as far as identifying the vulnerabilities, we're going to pull those vulnerabilities from a dedicated vulnerability scanner, like a Qualys, a Rapid7, or a Nessus Tenable. So we'll get the inventory information over from ADDM, and we'll pull that in. But the other thing we're going to do at that point is we're also going to identify. Thanks for calling that out. I did forget to talk about it. We're also going to pull in what we call the blind spot. So if we look at the top left. There's 16 hosts in this environment that are unscanned, meaning our vulnerability scanners aren't looking at them, but they are known to ADDM. So this information comes over from Discovery, as does on the right side the software instance information, and that helps us identify things that we're not scanning with our vulnerability scanners. I think in most environments we hope that our vulnerability scanners are hitting everything, but I think generally speaking in most environments BMC Discovery is seen as a more comprehensive network scanner as far as finding the hosts, and then we'll leverage the information from the Rapid7, Qualys, and Nessus vulnerability scanners to actually find the express vulnerabilities on these targets. So ADDM discovery brings over asset information, it brings over software information, and then we'll integrate the vulnerability scan information in and leverage all the great information that comes from ADDM. A couple more questions?
Yep, so there's another one just to round out on discovery. Can I assume discovery version 11.1 is required as it's using a REST API?
You know what's funny? In my demo environment, I'm actually using discovery version 10. So I know it works at least as far back as 10. But I also know that it works on 11. So.
Okay. And then the next question is there some automatic building options for creating patching scripts?
There are APIs to go through and build these things, and while they're not officially supported yet, we have done a number of those things for our own demo purposes. And if you're interested in talking about that, by all means, reach out to us after the webinar, and we're happy to talk about how we can make that happen for you.
Okay. There are a couple more. You're more popular
Please.
than I would have anticipated. What is the process to get network devices vulnerabilities? BNA.
So network device vulnerabilities come in from scanners just like they do for server devices. And then we've got integration through Threat Director for network devices through BNA to do remediation, and then that's coming for our response service later this year.
Okay. And then the next one is, how do these processes tools integrate with the existing ITSM tools Remedy or Remedy Force, in which we manage changes in change schedule? That's a closed loop.
Yep. So the awesome thing is what this will do is over on the BSA side, when we go identify a change that needs to happen, a vulnerability that needs to get remediated, we will go create the change. Forgive me for probably giving everybody a little bit of whiplash. We can go and we will go create through the integration with Remedy the changes as needed or integrate to an existing change, just like you would in BSA, but as we said, completely hands-off. So that gets created in a fully automated fashion, and it will go it'll go create the change or a tie out to it using the same integration we're using in BSA today, and we're looking to expand what that does and how it does it in the next, in the future. And then I see a question from Matt Lambie at Computer Center. Can response kick off a rescan via discovery once remediation is complete? It doesn't right now, but that is something we've got on the short-term roadmap to go do the rescans. In the case of BSA, what we do is we go do a patch analysis job to verify that the patch successfully deployed and that the vulnerability is now closed. There are some field kits to tie out to the vulnerability scanners to pull that information in out of the box. And Hrove, forgive me, I'm going to attempt this. Hervoye Kuchak is asking, is there out-of-the-box integration with BNC client management? Not right now, but we're definitely talking about what we can do in that area, and we'll make sure to take that out of this webinar and take it back to product management. Supported scanners, and what's the method for integrating them or getting the scan results into SecOps Response? Thank you, Katie, for the question. Supported scanners right now are Qualys, Rapid7, Expose, and Nessus. Nessus made by Tenable. Method for integrating them, right now you can pull the files in manually as I showed. There's a field kit for pulling them in via the API. We've got scripts to go load those scans. At some point we'll probably have a fully hands-off thing that'll go pull them in a completely automated fashion. But right now it's not hard at all to get your scans into SecOps Response. And the last question I've got so far from Alejandro Cortez. Is there any type of integration with TrueSight operations, like Event Forward, for instance? Not right now, but we're definitely interested in talking about that. If you want to send, if you want to shoot us an email after the webinar, we'd be happy to talk about that. We are working closely with the TrueSight people on the integrations, but there's not anything built today to do that. And I think that's the last question I have. Megan, do you see any after question 13?
No, there's no more.
Okay.
We've got everything. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for the awesome questions. Our email addresses, this is Allison Kramer. It's just Allison_Kramer@bmc.com, and Sean is Sean_Berry@bmc.com. So feel free to reach out to us. Again, thank you for your attention. I hope you found this helpful, and we will be back in touch soon with more webcasts. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.